Foundation. Is that correct?
Yes, the Sea Lions Foundation, and now the Terraformers as well.
The Terraformers?
Yeah, this is new. I haven't talked to you about them yet.
Well, good. We got a lot of stuff to talk about, and I just set aside 2 hours just for the hell of it, you know.
All right.
If you get bored with me or anything, you know, I'll understand, but...
no, I've always thought our conversations didn't have enough time.
Well, you know, I had a great show today with earlier this morning with my friend Dr. Jake Wade, who has done the. He started out with the Little Red Schoolhouse over 20 years ago for homeschoolers, and then he went on to expand and grow and became an accredited university here in Texas.
Wow.
Timothy Bible College.
Wow.
And he calls the Bible his answer book. And we talk today about the book of Enoch and the book of Genesis, which one of my other guests, Jonathan Gray, an archaeologist that has traveled all over the world and states in his book Forbidden Secrets, that once upon a time, the fiction article that I wrote 45 years ago about the continent and the civilization of Atlantis, which spread all over the world. And, you know, I'm a little off the wall sometimes. I said, well, the evidence to me says that this civilization that was more advanced than ours, that was able to build the pyramids without any slaves carrying up multi-ton, perfectly formed blocks of granite.
Well, that couldn't happen anyway.
That it may have been that we, because of the location of all these ancient civilizations, high civilizations, far advanced civilizations, we may have been colonized and enslaved by interstellar drug dealers. What's more valuable than gold?
Well, it depends on what you want to do. Uranium is, you know, it costs more per ounce than gold, but you can't wear it as jewelry, right? Probably platinum is more valuable than gold. Rubies are more valuable than gold, but rubies are kind of useless except for decoration. Well, no, you can make lasers with them. Yeah, it depends on what you're wanting to do. And you know, when I look at the amazing technology of the ancient world, I have some real trouble with the idea that we were colonized and enslaved and somebody taught us all this stuff just because of what we've seen since 1895. In 50 years, we went from horse and buggy to nuclear weapons and jet fighters. And I haven't seen any credible reports that any aliens were in on that. I have heard reports, I just haven't seen it they have been able to put any credence to.
Now,
So
humanity... I have had a father-in-law, Colonel Lloyd Conrad, who escorted one of the small grays that survived the Roswell crash. He escorted him to Truman's office.
That's after the time period I'm talking about. That was in 47. I'm talking 1895 to 1945. I got no evidence that aliens helped us invent the airplane or invent the assembly line or invent the idea of research, which unfortunately came from the Rockefeller Foundation. I hate to give them credit for anything good, but they're the ones who figured out what research is and how to scientifically solve a scientific problem.
Now, the way I look at this, there aren't really any aliens, and it's kind of the way I put it. I think we are the ancient aliens. We had, and the reason that the UFO are so top secret today is that the government doesn't want you to know that we could have lunch on the moon and be back in time for dinner without using a drop of gasoline.
I believe that. Oh, yeah, I believe that.
I believe there's two races of people on this planet. One has space travel, one has anti-gravity, one has teleportation, and the rest of us are kind of, as Obama says, we're just too small-minded to be able to govern ourselves.
Yeah, useless eaters. Yeah.
And yeah. I just interviewed, I just talked to a guy, I'll have him on my show Tuesday, and he has pretty much refined and is ready for production of magnetic generators.
Okay.
That contain the magnetic field within the generator, and I guess Tuesday I'll get into more detailed scientific explanation. But I said, this is what we need. You know, we need to be able to put our generator for our electricity in our garage and shut the garage door and not worry about it anymore.
All right.
He said, we can do that, but he won't do it here.
No, here in the United States, actually in most of the Western Hemisphere, you'll be disappeared for something like that.
That's exactly what he said. He said he's planning on doing it in Indonesia, because he said the Indonesians don't want to run that Morgan's copper wire under the ocean and across the from island to island. So they're financing him, and he's going to build it over there in Indonesia.
Yeah, the Indonesians are kind of like the Muslim version of the Amish. They want to be as completely independent as they can. They know that their islands have every resource they could ever desire. And the only reason they might need trade with the outside world is just long enough to get some technology they haven't figured out for themselves yet, and then they shut the door again. I like those guys. I really do. One of the technologies that we're planning on using in the terraformers and the Sea Lions Foundation is called the Wave Reaper. This is the cheapest form of electricity so far known to man. It just uses a plastic, like a 55-gallon drum, bobbing up and down in the waves, pulling on a cable, and the cable turns a shaft, and the shaft makes electricity. Right? The guy who invented that was from Sweden. I can't pronounce his name. He got permission from was one of the Guyanas down in South America. French Guyana, Dutch Guyana, somebody. They gave him some beach. They facilitated his permits. And he put together a 2-megawatt power plant for under $20,000 US. And once he got it working, and word got out, the government suddenly turned hostile, and the inspectors were coming around telling him his permits weren't in order, the ones that they themselves had helped him put together and facilitated. He called his friends back in Sweden one day. He said, I was in a car wreck this morning that I don't think was an accident. And then he called it back, over the next couple of days saying, I think I'm being followed. And then they never heard from him again. He's gone. That's been, 10, 12 years now. He's gone. And his plant was dismantled by the Guyanese government. Yeah,
I've got a film. I think the name of it runs on water up on the top of my website.
Okay.
And they talk about Stan Myers. And Stan Myers had a dune buggy that ran on water. And then he was dead.
What did they get him with? Child porn, car accident, plane accident?
It was a poison.
Poison, okay. Yeah, I was afraid he might have shot himself twice in the back of the head while his hands were tied together. Yeah. That's a common form of suicide among people that do what the New World Order doesn't like. But, the New World Order is really not my main concern, because as part of my environmental research for the terraformers, I've discovered that this society has already shot itself in the head, just like the Romans did when they discovered how easy lead was to work and its many uses, and that it was even sweet. They used it as a sweetener. And thus they drove themselves nuts. I mean, you could pull skeletons out of a Roman cemetery, and you see levels of lead that are just off the charts. All right, and lead is proven to cause criminal insanity and violence. And I say proven in that the studies have been done of the use of lead in gasoline in countries around the world, and even different states in the United States that outlawed it at different times. You take the date that it was outlawed, go forward 20 years, and you watch the crime rate drop like a rock. And then you go back to the date that it was introduced, and you move forward 20 years, and you watch the crime rate accelerate. And it's always based on the date that lead was introduced to the gas and then banned from the gas. Lead makes you crazy and violent. What this society has done is the same thing, only with a more toxic substance, mercury, like in your thermometer.
And mercury, by the way, is pretty instrumental in anti-gravity, isn't it?
I don't know enough about anti-gravity to answer that, but I'll take your word for it. That sounds right. Yeah. The unique properties it has just tell me that it's going to be an amazing scientific tool, but like uranium, you keep it locked away. You know, you don't put it on your cupcakes, okay?
Well, in that vein here, we need people need to understand that these chemtrails are contributing to Alzheimer's, dementia, and a host of other psychiatric disorders. And where does that aluminum come from? Oh yeah, fluoride. The fluoride comes from the making of aluminum. So what's happening is these chemtrails that are being sprayed on everything, that all of our food and our water is combining with the fluoride in the water and creating more dementia, more brain damage, more lower IQs, not to mention the whole DNA alteration that's even being done now. I mean, if you didn't have enough to worry about, folks, here, let me give you one more thing. That Wi-Fi you're using on the computer is damaging your daughter's DNA and reproductive. And their daughters. And their daughters.
Yeah, it's Wi-Fi is the new thalidomide. Technical question here. A moment ago, I hit my mute button and coughed. Did it work, or did you hear me cough?
I did not hear you cough.
Awesome. Okay, because I've had mute buttons in the past that were fantastic. What I'd like to do is give your audience one problem to worry about that makes all these other problems shrink into a proportion where they can be dealt with.
Okay.
Okay? And the reason I want to do that is, you know, I'm a bit of a philosopher, but when I try to apply my philosophy or come up with a philosophy, I go back and I check over, I talk to old people, and I find out, you know, is this realistic, you know, because we're dealing with people here, not fantasy robots or something. And I'm generally pretty good at this. One thing I've learned is that you're typically about as grown up and mature and as big and as powerful as the problems you face. And when we meet somebody who's been through a lot of problems, they're more grown up, they're more mature, even if they lost every battle. It doesn't matter. It's the fact that they faced the problem is what makes them grow. Okay? So I'm going to give you a huge problem that's going to make you so big that you can pee on the New World Order's head and it'll be green by the time it hits. Okay?
So they really made an effort to create problems, destroy companies, you know, kill me, and run my family off,
But they also want to reduce the number of problems the average citizen faces so that he never grows up to the point where he might challenge them. We need problems. We're butterflies. That's our cocoon that we have to struggle out of in order for our wings to be strong enough to fly. By creating the welfare state, they've created a bunch of children. Seriously, it's a horrible thing what they've done. But here's the problem I want to give you. In 5 billion years, the sun is going to go out. All right, that's what the brain boys tell us, and I'm willing to take it on faith. Okay, that's not the problem. Here's the problem. The problem is, I want, at year 5 billion, I want my descendants, okay, on a direct male line, sons all the way with, you know, beautiful daughters that they married from other families, having happy children who grow up and go on and grow big and strong and have little children of their own. I want my descendants to come from wherever they live in the universe in their privately owned spaceships to have a gigantic family reunion and party and watch the old home sun wink out. I want my family line to make it all the way to whatever this universe wraps up as, whether it's the heat death that the scientists tell us is going to happen, or if the second coming, or if Shiva finally gets off his butt and closes it all up, or Ragnarok. I don't care. I want my boys facing it. Okay?
Okay.
So I care about my family line. A lot of people don't realize they care about it until you bring it up in a conversation, and you realize, well, yeah, I don't want my family line to die out. No matter how I may feel about having kids at this moment, I don't want my family line to die out. All right? So if you take that as your big problem, right, and say, okay, what do I need to do to make it to Y5B as independent people who own their own spaceships and have the time to come from wherever they live in the universe to watch this historic event and clink a glass with complete strangers who are related? Okay. Well, okay, let's see here. First of all, on a planet is the only place where it's even possible to live in one place, where you can actually build a house on a piece of dirt and just live there. Everywhere else in the universe, you're going to live in motion. You want to go out among the asteroids and set up a palatial estate out there where you're in charge of a mining corporation and you've got a glass dome and gardens and so on. You're in motion all the time, and you have to. Even if you build it on an asteroid, that asteroid's going to be moving around. You have to be ready to adapt to. There's going to be different earthly currents out there, different electrical currents that you go through, different levels of cosmic radiation, all kinds of changes you'll be constantly facing, just as if you were living a seaborne life, and you go, but let's not say living at sea, but you go from this port to that port to that port, and then you go back to the island where you've established your headquarters, okay, your quote home, unquote. And then you stay there for a while, you go to another port, and let's say you're engaged in international trade, all right? That's easy for a small guy. Indian silk is $5 a yard in India and $15 a yard in LA. Okay? Stevia, the sweetener, is $1.50 a pound in Brazil and $15 a pound in the US. And so there's plenty of trade to be had in small valuables. And so if I'm going to make it to Y5B, I have to not be an integral part of a nation, because nations don't last 5 billion years, and they take all their integral parts down with them when they go. They take down, all the politicians, the generals, the teachers, etc. These are the ones who are most surely destined to die when a nation goes under. People who are spread out and who weren't really part of the quote nation, unquote, like the farmers and the local blacksmith, okay, those guys, they just switch masters. Or they die in the army. Okay, so I can't be a tight part of a nation. Can't worry about nations. And I want to take a minute here, and I want to lay the United States Constitution to rest with all honors. Okay, and in the Constitution it states that any treaty signed by the President and ratified by the Senate becomes the supreme law of the land and overrides even the Constitution itself. In 1946. According to the Constitution, the United States was ended by Truman and the Senate. They signed the United Nations Treaty, which requires us to obey the United Nations laws. And the United Nations laws and the charters state that all member nations must conform their laws to match the United Nations laws. Throughout the 50s, Senator Bricker fought this. He brought it to the Senate's attention over and over in various ways, including proposing a constitutional amendment that said we can sign treaties, but they don't overrule our Constitution. Every time the Senate voted him down. The Senate voted down, not only in 1946, but again throughout the 50s, they voted down the United States Constitution, and they did it lawfully. The United States Constitution, with its own suicide clause, was shot in the head. It's done.
All right. Well, people have been talking about this being a corporation.
Funny here to tell you,
they're talking about it being a corporation, so let me do this for that.
Okay. I've cried my tears for America and washed my face. It was a great idea. Yeah.
You know, Joshua, I have said, I've made comments like, I think we may have been in Armageddon for the last 100 years. The press just didn't bother to tell, the preacher didn't bother to tell us about it. We have, as this song's playing, I'm looking at rows and rows and rows of headstones.
Yeah.
At the various national cemeteries around the country.
Boys and girls that were lied to their deaths.
We have killed more people, and possibly we may have killed more Americans, especially if you toss in abortion here. We've killed more Americans than the Soviets did, than the Bolsheviks did, than Stalin did.
Well, I would agree with the disclaimer that I'm not part of that we. I take no responsibility for what this government does because there's no one can speak for me. I have no representative there. Until there is a representative who understands that kerosene does not turn steel and concrete skyscrapers to powder, I have no representative there. And there is no representative there who will publicly admit that kerosene does not turn steel and concrete skyscrapers to powder.
When I refer to that, March 2004, I referred to that whole thing as an exaggerated case of Jewish lightning. They leased those towers that were condemned. They were already condemned. The engineering firms have been there for 10 years and decided that they couldn't be saved because they couldn't build scaffolding that high. So the Jews that ran the Port Authority leased the buildings and building number 7 to Larry Silverstein,
right?
Who immediately insured them for a few billion and allowed the Mossad to bring in the atomic bombs to blow it up.
Well, I've seen some of the evidence for nukes, and I think nuke is probably not quite the right word. Whatever bomb comes, whatever energy weapon comes after nukes, and we don't know what those are because Uncle Sam didn't tell us. Okay.
The veterans today, Gordon Duff, who's in the intelligence field anyway, they ran tests and found out that we had given the nukes to Israel, and Israel rebuilt them, and they traced them. So
I haven't read that, but I'll take it as a clear enough fact. Sure.
We
do know.
June.
I don't dig into 9/11. Just like if I've got a 5-year-old kid and I come into the bathroom and I find the pet turtle is in the toilet, okay, with the 5-year-old kid in the bathroom. The kid's trying to tell me a story about a parachute malfunction. Okay, I don't need I don't need to know what's actually happened that got the turtle in the toilet. I know the kid did it. I know that he's lying to me. Okay, that's all I need to know. I don't need to investigate the parachute malfunction of the turtle that landed him in the toilet. I know the kid's lying to me. I take whatever punishment is appropriate. Give him a timeout, swat him a butt, whatever we're going to do, and put the turtle back in his bowl. Okay. I don't investigate 9/11. I don't investigate chemtrails. I don't investigate all these other things because I know that to make it to I-5B, I have to get out of a society that is run by psychopaths, and which is turning all of its own people into some degree of nut job. I mean, it's working hard. When you look into the sovereign citizen movement, and you look into the constitutionalist movement, and you look into the patriot movement, which kind of combines aspects of both of those, what you find is all of them can come up with documents and hard facts that support conflicting positions. Okay? And I believe that all of that is real and was actually done by the people they say it was done by, but there's a central command that ordered all these conflicting things to happen in order to create confusion when they wanted to really bring it all down. I think it's all about confusion, because what you need to do to get your family line to Y5B is decide that nations don't frickin' matter. What matters is who's got your back and who doesn't. And the average American does not have the average American's back. I mean, if your house was surrounded by a SWAT team right now, is there any group of people who knows you so well that they would say, "Now wait a minute, I know that guy. He wouldn't do anything illegal. I mean, that merited being swatted," and they would attack that SWAT team from the outside and bust you out and use their own resources to get you somewhere safe. Is there anybody like that? For most people, the answer is no. Not one. But that is the condition that is required for revolution. The people have to know and trust one another. That's what we had in 1776, even though that was a bogus revolution. It was financed by the King of England just like he paid for his own armies. All right. So the ADL gives me credit, more or less, for starting the militias. And I did, but I did it in the governor's office, so it wasn't exactly the terrorist group that they tried to make it out to be. Yeah.
And that governor ran for president on the Libertarian ticket, Gary Johnson.
Yeah.
But he didn't have a shot. Neither did Charles Collins, who ran for president.
No. Well,
years ago.
When you want to weaken the corporation, the board of directors will not appoint you to the CEO position. That's just not how it works. It's not a government. It's a corporation. It makes money, even though they claim a deficit every year. Okay. This is just not something that's good for you or me. They don't have your back, and we have to get into a position where you and I have talked, and we share a lot of the same ideas, but we haven't established a kind of friendship yet where I've got your back, you got mine, even if it comes down to bullets and one of us dragging the other wounded out of harm's way to somewhere safe. Okay. In order for humans to be safe, they have to have those kind of friendships and relationships. And they have to have resources for the fight.
Well, that was the reason that I conceived of and tried to establish the Liberty Village on the 5 acres I had there in New Mexico.
Okay.
Low-cost structures, grow our own food.
Uh-huh.
Teepees, yurts.
Sure.
Well,
in New Mexico, you could build with adobe. It's actually a very good building material. You could make a house that's cool and hot and warm in the cool. Yeah.
Yes, and they've also got hempcrete, which is now we can build with that in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're allowing them to grow hemp again.
Hempcrete rocks. I envision hempcrete used to make spherical orbital farms up in low Earth orbit. Oh yeah.
That's interesting. And one of the books that I wrote, people created spherical spaceships.
Yep.
Made out of clay. They formed them,
Yeah.
and they just fired them around the sun. And the sun turned them into ceramic. So they built these ceramic magnetic powered ships.
You don't even need to send them around the sun. In orbit around the Earth, you can set up mirrors to focus the sun's rays on them and have your field of exactly what configuration you like. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's a great idea, because a spaceship that never has to enter a gravity well, it's just going to go from orbit to orbit and then drop a lander ship. It never has to deal with significant kinetic forces.
That ship that I described was pretty large.
Yep.
And it had a elevator that went up to the center of it, to a platform right in the center of the ship.
Yeah.
And in the center of the ship, it was weightless. You were weightless up there because all of the gravity was created by the turning of the sphere.
Yeah.
And so
that's one of the things.
You're going to love this. For the sport, the crew donned wings and could fly in the zero gravity.
I do love that. Larry Niven wrote a whole book like that called The Integral Trees. Oh yeah, it was actually not a planet. It was an oxygen nitrogen water cloud that I think it had been knocked off of the planet by a planetary impact. But it was big enough that it held together of its own gravity and orbited the sun, and there were clumps of dirt floating in it that came together because they're more massive, and then there were seeds that came in. So a whole biosphere grew up in this cloud of atmosphere and water that's orbiting a sun, and people lived in it, and they flew from tree to tree. The trees grew out shaped like an integral sign, which is like the letter I with a tail at each end, and the tails go opposite ways like a propeller. Okay, and they put on wings and they flew. Yeah, it's just a rockin' good book.
And Larry Niven, before I was 14 years old, I read every science fiction book in the Fort Worth Public Library. Larry Niven, Robert A. Heinlein, Edgar Isaac Asimov, Harlan Ellison.
Larry Niven got the greatest compliment a science fiction author can get, I think. Somebody in an interview on TV asked Arthur C. Clarke, who's famous sci-fi author and the guy who invented the geostationary orbit. Okay. They asked him on TV, who's your favorite science fiction author? He said, well, that's easy, Larry Niven.
What I have, and this is all part of the plan. I'm supposed to be writing about it right now, but I'll put it off till in the morning. I'm planning. I told people, I don't think I've been telling you the truth there about everything that's going on for 20 years. And frankly, I don't think you can handle the truth, so I may just only write science fiction in the future, because my science fiction is more believable than the truth.
Well,
reality.
It wasn't my intention, but I realized after I stated the Wi-Fi-B problem a couple of years ago that this enabled people to ignore the truth while still working towards something that mattered. They don't have to look at the truths of, what's wrong with America, what's wrong with NATO, the UN. All they have to look at is, historically, do these things really work for 5 billion years? And the answer is no. And when they go down, do they usually kill millions upon millions of people? Well, yeah. So should I be a part? No, just kind of operate on the periphery. Take what advantage I can. But what I need around me is not a nation. It's more like a tribe, group of people that know me, care about me. I know that I care about. Yeah. So if they take on the Wi-Fi-B problem, okay, I want my family line to make it to that party. Okay. The need to face these things in detail drops, and so the emotional stress of facing them in detail drops. All right, and we have a window of probably The longest it's going to be is probably 15 years, when we can still accomplish anything so that our individual families can make it to Y5B. Okay? After that, I think the window's going to close and we would have no more chance than a medieval peasant. Right? Because that's what they're moving back toward. Okay? My view of the development of the United States is that it was very coldly and sinisterly, if that's a word, calculated to to turn loose European peasants on all this land, and even let them run it. Not just let them think they're running it, but let them run it, knowing that we know more about controlling people than they do. And once they've tamed it for us and built industries for us, we can take back over again. Okay.
Well, I've suggested that, I don't really, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to just run the New World Order, or show them how to run it.
Well,
or the people.
I think we're going to end up hunting the New World Order down and killing it. Every man, woman, and child. Yeah, that's how evil I think these guys are, and how antithetical to human health and happiness their plans are. Yeah, there's something wrong with these guys. And then you know who I think they are. We talked about that before. Hey, dumb question. Can you go to commercial for 45 seconds so I can refill my coffee?
Oh, absolutely. Matter of fact, I probably need to do that myself. I think I've still got a cup over there.
Yeah.
And let me see what I can do here. Yeah, let me do this.
Okay.
A foreign nation, ever aggressive and violent to its neighbors, has suborned the so-called representatives of the people of these United States to treason. Further, it is with the people's money that this bribery has been perpetrated. A nation formed on exaggerated guilt over an ever-increasingly exposed, exaggerated occurrence. The very questioning of the validity of these claims now criminalized in some European nation. What truth needs the power of the gun to defend it? A nation-state who never lives up to a treaty obligation nor ever pays back a loan. A nation-state that receives billions of dollars annually in grants of cash, weapons, and loans, which it will never, ever be asked to repay. A nation-state racist to the core, who abuses its own citizens, is apartheid, has even sterilized minority immigrants, yet who wears race on its sleeve as a deception. Any questioning of the actions of this nation-state is called racist. A nation that has killed Americans in international waters in an attempt to false flag the United States into war with Egypt, a nation we have no quarrel with. Ironically, the attack was on a vessel named Liberty. A nation-state in possession of hundreds of nuclear weapons has admitted in documented discussion in its own legislature, and the delivery system sufficient to threaten any point in the world, yet who refuses to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. This fact alone makes it against American law for it to receive aid from the United States. Additionally, this state has been exposed for attempting to sell nuclear weapons to apartheid South Africa. But what does law matter when to run for high office in the United States, a prerequisite is to take a pilgrimage and show obedience to this nation state? To whom do your duties lie, representative? For whom do you concern yourself? That's a rhetorical question, for the answer is all too clear. No, we're not your enemy because we wish to be. We are your enemy because you have left us no choice. For the future of these United States to not be a corporate gulag controlled by an international elite. For these United States to not be the greatest threat to world peace. For these United States to not be a threat to the food supply of the world. For these United States to not be the next destructive empire. For these United States not to be the reason for thermonuclear war that destroys humanity. For these United States to not be the club by which millions more in the Middle East and Africa are murdered in the lust for profit and at the behest of a cancer we ourselves planted in Palestine. For these United States to be a place where my grandson can have equal justice under the law. For these United States to return to a republic. For justice and the rule of common law and respectful of natural rights. We, the real Americans, must declare ourselves your enemies, and as such, enemies of the police state you have so craftily and illegitimately created. My name is Chuck Smith, Texas, USA, and I say to you openly and without reservation, I pledge my life, my wealth, and my sacred honor to stand in the defense of the original Constitution of these United States, to expose you for the war criminals and perpetrators of crimes against humanity that you are, and with my last breath to spit in your lying eyes. Cry havoc and loose your dogs of war on us if you will. I am not alone. For we, the real American public, are your enemy. Americans, strength and honor, be of service, talk to people, save lives, and for the good of your progeny, get involved. May your God or your gods go with you.
All right, you are listening to the Free American. My guest is Joshua Daniels of the Sea Lions Foundation. And I dedicate that to all of those neocon dual citizens in our Congress, in our House, in our Supreme Court, and of course, the gay guy in the presidency, too.
And his pet monkey that lives there with him that pretends to be his wife.
That's right. That's right. And now, but, you know, remember, it is gay, lesbian, and transsexual month.
You're hitting on a
Touch my mouth out with coffee. God.
Oh yeah, no, you're hitting on an important point there. Throughout history, when a society pushes specialization by creating a cash-driven society to the point where the father has to spend most of the day away from his family, then homosexuality quickly becomes a problem, because sons and daughters both get their sexual identity from interactions with their father. Girls become girls by being with their daddies. Boys become boys by being with their daddies. I don't want to underrate mom's importance. It's vital in those first 3 or 4 years, but after that period of time, she really is free to, go become a doctor or whatever it is she always dreamed of, because her importance is dwindling. And this is not from a religious standpoint. This is the works of sociologist Piaget and countless others like him. When a psychiatrist, you remember Masters and Johnson back in the 80s? They were famous sex researchers.
Yeah.
Yeah, they quit being famous, didn't they? The media quit writing about them. And the reason is they took what they had learned and they started curing gays and lesbians. They had they treated it as a developmental disorder and they had a 75% cure rate, as shown by long-term follow-up studies, where an independent polling company, a phone research company, would call the patient and say, "Hey, can I ask you a few questions? It's about your sexuality. That you did work with Master and Johnson. We're going to follow up on that. Okay? And, yeah, well, I'll answer your questions. Okay. Are you still straight? Yes. Do you like it? Yes. Do you ever go back and play in the gay stuff? No, it's not interesting. Just not interested anymore." Okay, and that was 75%, which is a better cure rate than any doctor has with the common cold. Okay, and any psychiatrist today who treats homosexual behavior as a developmental disorder has between a 60 and 75% success rate.
I don't know. Maybe I should go see him. I've kind of suspected for a few years that I was just a lesbian trapped in a man's body.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
But it's all right. I can deal with it.
We all have our coping methods. Anyway, what that tells me is that whatever I do for my family to make it to Y5B, we got to have kids, which means at least some degree of straightness in the family. And that means I have to structure my life and teach my sons to live their lives so that they're with their families during those first 16 years. Right? That if they have a business, the business is at home. If the customer says, "Hey, this is really weird, but I'm talking to my attorney in his office, but right next door is the room with the crib, and mommy comes in and out. I think that's just too weird." He has to say, "You know what? If it's too weird for you, I don't need your money. Maybe you should find another attorney." Okay? Or whatever the kid is doing for his living. It needs to be there, part of the family, just like the cottage industries that rose up and made Europe strong and made America strong, where, maybe daddy had a store downstairs and the family lived upstairs and there's a garden out back, but the family was together while daddy made whatever cash he made, and the family made its living together. See, that produced a strong and healthy people. It was actually the same in the Kaiser's Empire. They weren't yet a strongly urban people like they were in World War II. Okay? Same was true in France and Britain. So you were able to have these people who felt such intense loyalty, they would go over the wire knowing that, 4 out of 10 weren't coming back.
One of the things that we've talked about, this was also underlying my Liberty Village concept. And you've made reference to this. You want somebody on your back. You want neighbors that care about you. I figured if you've got, a small farm, 5 acres, just 5 acres what I had in New Mexico, and you put low-cost structures up, so you can I can buy a teepee for $5,000 and set it up, and that was good enough for the Indians for a few thousand years. And you put veterans. I don't like the idea of homeless veterans.
I don't either. I hate that.
And these veterans have been trained. All they need is direction and a little bit of backup.
Well,
and they could on this 5 acres, they could milk the goats, they could herd the cattle, they could mend the fences, and they could defend the neighborhood if things went bad sometime in the future.
But a scenario that worries me about Liberty Villages is that works as long as your enemies are limiting themselves to small arms. Not much you can do against an F-14 or an armored personnel carrier. And as I said in my interview with, it went up on Bucketed.com in April. What was that guy's name? Spitzbergen. I don't remember his name. If you can't put a fighting force in the field that's 2/3 as large as any combination of enemies you're likely to face, and if you don't have enough men turning 18 every month to replace your expected casualties in that fight, then you're too small to stay still. You're not too small. You're too small to stay in one place. Okay? Because they're going to gang up on you. They're going to use the fact that you can't run. And it doesn't matter who they is. Okay, it could be Wisconsin and Indiana versus Illinois. Okay, if Illinois can't get up and run, right? So, given these military realities, especially if you're going to do something that anybody with control over men with guns doesn't like, you need to be able to run until you're strong enough to turn and fight. And that's why I want to take the Liberty Villages concept and transplant it to a mobile platform. Okay, one with people can know themselves. Okay, and they don't have to lay out $5,000 like for a TV, but they do have to do significant work. All right, and we do have to raise money, but it doesn't have to come out of your pocket. That's how we're doing the terraformers, which if I can switch subjects onto that, and then I want to go back and tie up how this helps you with your Wi-Fi B problem. Okay.
Okay. I also want you to kind of we're actually coming up on a
1 hour commercial break.
Yeah, I'm doing a little break here.
Sure.
But I want you to describe the whole idea. I like your concept of the Sea Lion Foundation, of the boats that are self-sufficient.
Call them homes. If you say boat or ship, it creates a picture that people can't get past. But if you say it's a floating home that can go anywhere in the world, then they say, wow, and it's a different picture. And it's one that they can look at.
I wrote about my character in One Bloody Alabaster Eye. He moves from a trailer into a houseboat.
Yeah.
And that was called the Sea Deuce. I had a 28-foot Hatteras that I called the Sea Deuce. So I just applied the name to a houseboat, and my character was based on the John D. McDonald's character, Travis McGee. My character originally started out as Trevor McGee, and I'm going back to that. I changed the name after they threatened to sue me, after John D. McDonald's son threatened to sue me. Nothing he can sue me over. Everything I write is totally original. There is no plagiarism.
Right.
And you can't trademark the name McGee, so I'm going back to Trevor McGee as opposed to Trevor Cameron as it is written right now.
Well, if we're about to go to an hour break, let me sink a hook in the audience before we do.
Go ahead.
Okay. For humanity to grow, we have to be able to grow off this planet. All right? And for humanity to be happy, each individual person has to be running his own life. That's just how it works. All right? Ever since we invented employment, we have invented increasing misery. Right? And that means individual families living in space, and your spaceship has got to have a source of food on it. It's got to have its own hydroponic farm. It's got to have its own waste processing facility. It's got to be able to take from the environment around it. Like in space, there are clouds of water. There are electrical currents. All these things are out there, right? So you need to be able to get from one to the other and then take it once you're there, okay? But you'll never do that unless you get a little practice by living mobile. And the only way on this planet to live mobile is live at sea. And then you start learning how to use the seawater to get the fresh water that you need and to get the minerals for your hydroponics plants, hydroponics farms, and grow your farm on your own ship, including animals, goats and sheep and chickens, provide you with, fur and fiber and meat and eggs and dairy, right?
And a pen underneath your boat, your floating home. If you have a pen underneath that, you've got your own supply of protein.
From fish, yeah.
Right.
And these things move slowly enough, the fish will just swim with you. Yeah. So the hook I want to leave is, if you can't live at sea, you'll never live in space.
All right. I'm going to put that show on hold for a few moments because got some more information coming out here that you probably need to know. If you have got, and well, not many of you have, but you need to get the June and July issues of the Free American magazine. I have run these stories from Veterans Today about 9/11, about the nukes, and nobody in the mainstream is carrying this. Nobody in the publishing industry is carrying these stories. Only Veterans Today and the Free American. And I gotta tell you, the new story here, Gordon Duff broke huge news in his last interview that must be shared on all Facebook walls so we can prevent the next false flag. Gordon reported that sources in the Department of Energy confirm there is a very evil plan to detonate a nuke and blame on Iran. You need to spread this article, and I will link this article up on the website and up on the story. Well, let me play this. Gordon Duff, speak up. Oops, nope, they blocked that. They blocked that video. It's the nuclear attack on the U.S. is being planned to set up the next election. Sources in the Department of Energy says attack coming, and it will occur a few months prior to the next presidential election. The attack will be blamed on Iran to start a war on Iran. They plan on killing 100,000 to 200,000 Americans. It will be reported as a nuclear attack, and they already have the weapons selected for the attack. Gordon Duff reports that Veteran Today is now the #1 mainstream and alternative media website in the world because of the huge stage stories they are breaking. Gordon Duff describes how it is now a fact that 9/11 was a nuclear event. This has been confirmed by the U.S. government, UN, Russian government, and French government. Russians leaked evidence proving the nuclear weapons used as a partial payback for the U.S. involvement in Syria and Ukraine. Their evidence was confirmed by U.S. sources and French sources. And by the way, the Ukraine, this is all MI6, Mossad, and of course CIA, because the Jews want their Khazarian homeland back. So they got and they've certainly gone in there in the last century and killed over 11 million Ukrainians, because they happen to be white and Christians and in their homeland. Now they've declared war in Ukraine again, and they're trying to set this whole thing up and put Ukraine and Russia at odds with each other. The Sandia report, and folks, there's more to this. You need to read the Free American. You need to pass this show on, because I told you over 10 years ago, before Veterans Today was even started, about the first Homeland Security meeting in which they planned on a pandemic, in case of a single outbreak of smallpox in a major metropolitan area. They would need 400,000 to 500,000 well-trained, organized, disciplined troops to control the American people, well-armed, and of course Homeland Security, which is simply a old KGB operation, old Stasi operation. Marcus Wolf was used to do this, and the pandemic is being set up right now, right before your eyes, with thousands of illegal aliens from Central America, where maybe they haven't eradicated smallpox, they haven't eradicated Ebola, and those people are being sent up here and spread out to every city in America. And they've already stated that they were covered with lice and fleas, and that's your carrier for the smallpox, for some of these other diseases. The fleas from the prairie dogs that they picked up on the trek up here is happening. And oh, by the way, there was a train overturned down in Mexico with thousands of these illegals brought up from Central America being shipped up here by the Mexican government. The Mexican government and the Guatemalan government is shipping these people in here to us right now. They're doing this to set up a pandemic. They're doing this to set up the need for the UN. They've already shipped, and get this issue of the Free American, they've already shipped in the UN troops and the UN tanks. They're already done that, guys. My God, can't you see this is coming? It's all laid out in the Free American. How they're going to use the UN to get by this. This is all being set up, and Gordon Duff's video on this information is being blocked. Being blocked. The whole story of 9/11, a nuclear event, confirmed by the U.S. government, Russian government, French government. That's all there. Saudi report on the nuclear weapons used on 9/11 was leaked by the Russians. The U.S. government knew immediately 9/11 was a nuclear event, but the investigation was stopped because it would have taken down Bush. Now, CNN was offered the information proving the 9/11 was a nuclear event, but they squashed the story. The nukes used on 9/11 had no visible flash. The flashes were in the infrared range with a 100-foot range on most of them. The government tried to kill FBI agent Mike Dick, who was working on an investigation of 9/11. The FBI issued a mistaken be on the lookout alert on him, saying he was armed and dangerous, and sent out a team to kill him. He's now suing the U.S. government. ISIS is a Saudi CIA MI6 front. It is a large psychological warfare group that is very active. Boko Haram is being run by 9 generals in the Nigerian army, all theater. A nuclear attack on the U.S. is being planned to set up the next election. Department of Energy says attack coming will be blamed on Iran to start a war on Iran. They plan on killing 100,000, 200,000 Americans. It will be reported as a nuclear bomb, and they already have the weapons selected for the attack. American people are looked at like cattle. Everything you've been told about Benghazi is lies. The ones screaming the loudest are the ones responsible. U.S. is set up to be a slave labor police state. 40% of Congress is blackmailed over sex with children. Over 9,000 Americans died of radiation due to the 9/11 nuclear event before they stopped counting. Currently, 79,000 dying are due to cancers directly linked to nuclear weapons. Manhattan was a nuclear testing ground. And the mainstream news wants to argue over the Hobby Lobby request. They want to say the Supreme Court is denying access to birth control, that the Supreme Court is discriminating against women. The men on the Supreme Court shouldn't be allowed on decisions that affect women. This is all distraction in the mainstream news. That's all it is. And if I haven't given you enough to depress you for the weekend, let me tell you that the RFID chip, you might think of it as the mark of the beast, will be implemented in all public schools by 2015, citing gun violence. Due to the recent boom in school shootings, many educational facilities across the nation have required that parents have their children implanted with RFID chips before being allowed to attend class. Implementation of these devices will reduce deaths in the event of serious emergencies. Not only does it allow us to locate the whereabouts of all children, but they will also be able to sync up with the students' smartphone devices so that witnesses may immediately inform other students, or more importantly, the authorities. Teachers will be able to perform lockdowns much more efficiently in order to prevent more injuries and deaths. The perpetrators of these crimes can also be located and contained more efficiently before they can cause any additional harm. The program was praised by educators after the recent rash of shootings that left several dead and others injured. Charlene Hall, principal of Red Rock High School in Knoxville, Tennessee, had this to say about the program, which they plan to implement next year. We want our students to feel as safe as much as we want their parents to feel secure. The advent of recent events has proved that additional security measures are often not enough to prevent deaths in the event of a serious emergency. And you think having that little chip in their hands is going to prevent somebody from being shot? They go on to say these implants will ensure safety for all those who wish to obtain an education without worrying about the potential threats which might be lurking on campus. We've opened a hotline to answer all questions about the procedure, which will take place at the beginning of the year prior to student pictures. It is an essential step to securing our campuses and providing a safe environment for all. Others were skeptical about the program. Darlene Walsh has 2 students currently attending Brooks Middle School in Hampton, thought the RFID implementation was a bit extreme. I think we should just ban guns and get it over with. Why should my children have microchips shoved into their skin just so police can kill a shooter faster when he snaps? What if they accidentally kill my kid as well? Can't even think about this. This is so sick. This is Hegelian dialectic at its optimum. And okay, what else we got? Also, folks, you need to tell people about this. You need to get people to buy for $2.99, for $3, get the Free American magazines. June and July are very important, but April and May are very good too. You can read the first 11 issues of the Free American online right now. I am redoing my website. I am doing the ClayDouglas.com website. And I am going back to writing for, well, just about everybody. Just about everybody. They've tried to limit, Easy Rider doesn't want to publish what I write because of my politics. The same is true with American Free Press. I get too much truth out there, and they just don't want you to know. Alright. Alright, let's go back to Joshua Daniels.
Alright. like the sky, your spirit is one with me. Your wings span mighty ocean, your eyes see everything. The slightest of your motions can make the continents ring. Yet in all your might and glory, vanished from the sky, leaving just another story, mysteries of man-made lies. They tell of how you fell from the sky.
It was proud duty lane. I wrote that. I like that.
Awesome. You're a man of many talents.
Yeah, and I'm going to devote that here to writing. I almost had a burden lifted from me. I didn't know whether it was a failure. I didn't know how to read it when I had the accident. When I got out, everything had changed. And to this day, I really don't know, Joshua, what happened, because my family left, ended up leaving. The doctors told my family they needed to get guardianship. They needed to get make arrangements for long-term care, and be sure he takes his Depakote, be sure he takes his medicine. Not taking the medicine, the only thing I need is a joint and a Harley. And I don't know whether, I was pretty angry, I was pretty upset, because my wife said, Clay, the doctor, they saved your life. They didn't save my life. I had 3 broken ribs. I don't have brain damage. I didn't have a brain injury. I might have had a bump on the head. I might have had a concussion. I might have had some blood on the brain. But they actually tried to get guardianship, and when the investigator came out, said, Mr. Douglas, I've been doing this for 7 years. I interviewed 7 head injury patients before you today. You're the most well-recovered head injury patient I've ever met, I've ever talked to.
Wow. Why did they keep you so long on 3 broken ribs? They were already working to take you out of circulation and dissuade you from what you're doing?
Yes, sir. That was it. I referred to 9/11 as an exaggerated case of Jewish lightning. I put building number 7 on the cover. I had just come out with my True Face of FEMA film with the first Homeland Security meeting. In case of a single outbreak of smallpox in the major metropolitan area, we'll need 400,000 well-armed, well-trained, organized, disciplined troops to control the American people, because some of them just won't follow orders. Oh, you mean, some of us won't line up on the Kmart parking lot to get a vaccination for a disease that's been eradicated in this country for 100 years?
Smallpox?
Yeah.
Smallpox has been eradicated worldwide for 40 years. Last case was in 70-something.
So, yeah. And of course I was advocating the Liberty Village thing, and that might have been one of the excuses too. But when I came conscious again, I got no memory of 3 hospitals. I had people, some of the black nurses said, boy, you were one mean son of a bitch. Boy, you pulled pictures off walls and beat us over the head with it. I said, they should have been a clue to you. You had me on the wrong medication. Did anybody tell you? Didn't my family tell you I almost killed the first guy that gave me a Valium? They had me on Valium and morphine and a bunch of others. A bunch of other psychoactive chemicals. Well, they're exactly what they're doing to the veterans now. Halcyon, Haldol, Valium, morphine. And so to this day, I don't know, was I upset? Did I mistreat my family? My cousin, I remember somebody told me that he was mad at me because I didn't recognize him. I don't think it was brain damage, I think it was drugs. They had me on all of these drugs. And the only thing, I think they made one error in judgment, and that's trying to overdose an old biker.
Yeah.
Probably. But,
oh, that's funny. Oh, that is so funny.
You know, so for 10 years I've been trying to put it all back together again and trying to figure out what happened. And my ex-wife, who I was married to for 24 years, just got remarried a few days ago. She got remarried a few days ago, and her father, who was involved with Billy Saul Estes, told her if she came back to me after the accident, she went to Tennessee to meet him, and he told her if she came back to me, he would disown her. So she chose to work for him for the last 10 years.
Okay.
And
congratulations or condolences, whichever is appropriate.
yeah, I don't know. I congratulate her. Glad you found somebody. But it set me free, Joshua. I know that I'm not putting it back together with her, and it's after 10 years, it's reached a point that I don't care anymore.
You know, when Americans realize that America has turned its back on them in exactly the same fashion, they will be set free. But only when they figure it out. It's not your country anymore, and it never was the country they taught you in school.
I was pretty stunned when I got out of the Army. I took my oath seriously to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. No expiration date on that. But when I read the Constitution, nice little booklet here called Citizens Rule Book,
right?
I also read the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto, and I was kind of blown away, Joshua, because every plank on the Communist Manifesto is intact in America today. From the corporate farms to the heavily progressive graduated income tax to the central bank to the government control of education, number 10 on the planks.
Yep. Oh, yeah, a central bank, that was in place. The whole thing's a mess. You know what? You can't change the world, and it'll kill you for trying. Really. But you can create something new where the world has no power. And even the nations of this world do not claim to own the oceans. All their treaties, all their declarations are, we own out to 3 miles out, 22 miles out, whatever the number is, and then it's just international water. And their treaties are with one another about how they will behave when they're out there. When you're out on the ocean, you're not under that treaty, although you may occasionally come under the guns of a warship from some nation. You know, if you have these tank guns, you're not under that ship either. So with the law of the sea, the captain of that ship, the law of the sea treaty, he says, get to inspect you. And your answer would be, I've never signed that treaty. Try to board at your own peril.
Yeah, they started with, when they would stop me, you have any weapons on board? Of course.
Of course I do.
Of course I do. What do you want to see? You want to see the Mini 14 or you want to see the Uzi? Which one?
Well, if I don't know, if for whatever reason a sheriff shows up at my door, I'm going to show up armed, and he's going to ask, well, why are you armed? And I'll say, well, I saw armed men come to my door. I didn't want to be underdressed. It seemed disrespectful.
But you know what? Part of their thing is to divide and conquer. They want us to be afraid of the cops. I mean, do you get a warm, fuzzy feeling if you see a policeman in your rear view mirror?
No, quite the opposite.
But they also want the police to be afraid of us. Oh, he's a militia guy. He's a militia guy. He's a radical, or he's a sovereign. He's a sovereign. Sovereigns are dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, let me ask you about something else. Now, you talked about this law of the sea. I just saw a video on a rancher in Texas, and the government is trying to move in and declare one of his ditches, well, it has water in it. So we've got some kind of control over that. And he did a video up on YouTube of his kids sitting in a boat in this dry creek bed.
Now, it's in the Constitution that the federal government has jurisdiction over waterways, but it doesn't matter, because if you want to fulfill your oath to defend the Constitution, since the Constitution made the United Nations Treaty the supreme law of the land, now you have to defend the United Nations Treaty. So I'm thinking, if I were you, I would say, because of fraud and incomplete disclosure on the part of the other party asking you to make this compact with them, this compact is null and void.
Well, the researchers are finding out that we are a corporation. The president is president of the corporation, not our country, not the
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I kind of lean to the whole states' rights things. You know,
Yeah.
I'd like to restore our republic, our state republic, the state Republic of Texas.
Well, no, wait, you can't go backwards. Okay, that's never happened. But you can learn the lessons from the last time around and build something new and better incorporating those lessons. Now that we can do.
I don't think we should, frankly, I don't think we ever should have gave up the Rocky Mountains to other states. I mean, I don't like having to go over to another state to see my mountains.
You know what, as far as I know, most of that land was taken by broken treaties with the Indians. I'm thinking, well, I know that within a few decades, there will be less than 1 billion people on this planet, because this entire society has poisoned itself already past the tipping point with mercury. We're putting 6,000 to 10,000 tons of mercury vapor into the air every year, and mercury does not fall back down into the ground and go away. It gets into the ecosystem and goes uphill, so to speak. Now we've reached the point where there is mercury in our newborn babies. And that is not a death sentence, that's a torture for life sentence. And people who are sick and in pain, it is going to kill them earlier. I mean, the lifespans are already dropping here in the U.S. And all around the world. Cancer is increasing. Cancer was unknown in my family until my grandmother died of it in '97 or whenever it was. And then just last December, my dad had some kind of a pain that took him to the doctor's office. And they discovered that he already had stage 4 cancer. They gave him 4 to 6 months. He actually died on Ash Wednesday of this year. He had just over 2 months from the day they diagnosed him. And there are many, many factors involved in cancer, but we know that mercury is a big cancer causer. The list of problems that mercury causes is as long as your leg.
Now, isn't these new light bulbs that we're supposed to use, don't they contain mercury?
Huge amounts, huge amounts. If you break one in your house, you need to call a hazmat team to clean it up. Yes! Oh, there are huge amounts of mercury in those things. You can find online pictures of a guy that he happened to be barefoot. He stood on a chair to take one of these things out. It dropped and broke. And when he stepped down into the chair, he got a cut on his foot from the glass. And the horrible, horrible things that happened to his foot, or maybe with both feet even, because he got a cut on his foot with the substance that was in those light bulbs got into it. He was in the hospital for weeks. It was a near thing that he didn't lose the foot. It took him, I think it was over a year before he could walk again. Horrifying, just horrifying. And so there are actually 4 or 5 things that are going to destroy this civilization by the end of the century. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The industrial civilization, as we have developed it, is already dying. It cannot be saved. That's just, and with it, it's going to take over 6 billion people, period. The main reason for that is not because of the problems, but because our leadership is a bunch of stuttering psychopaths. And when problems occur and resources dwindle, what they do is seize more resources for themselves and push more of the problems off on the poor and the middle class, so that the problems actually get worse. And it's going to go down just like, ancient Rome was invaded, and Rome itself was sacked 4 or 5 times before they finally just officially called it over. Right? In this society, what we're going to see is the entire northern hemisphere and large parts of the southern hemisphere will be completely depopulated, and before they can be lived in again by anybody who can have children out to 3 or 4 generations, okay, they're going to lie fallow for a few centuries. That's what's going to happen, whether anyone likes it or not, and no matter what any government or people does about it. Okay, so yeah, if you want to establish liberty villages, do it somewhere other than the northern hemisphere. And my vote would be an island in the South Pacific, where the trade winds are keeping most of the bad stuff away from you. Now, the atmospheric problems of the northern hemisphere do not impinge on the southern hemisphere, because northern and southern air do not mix. There's a belt at the equator that forms an insulator. All right? Northern and southern water mix to a degree, but it's very small. So the fact that Fukushima is poisoning and killing the North Pacific is probably going to impinge very lightly on the Southern Pacific and the rest of the waters. Okay, but if you don't face the fact that society has the entire industrialized civilization around the world has already shot itself in the head, and it's going to take 60, 70 years for the body to collapse and hit the ground and quit breathing, then you're going to go with it. And your family line is going to go with it. Clay, I've known you from a few good conversations, but I know enough to know I don't want your family line to die out. If you don't have kids yet, I want you to find some hot little hoochie mama and make some. Okay? I'm young yet. I'm only 49. I got time to raise a family before I go. Okay? And now that the Sea Lions Foundation is functioning, the terraformers are starting to take off, there exists a world in which, there exists the possibility of a world in which I'm actually willing to bring kids in. I was not willing to have kids in a society where they would be serfs. I wouldn't do that to anybody. Like, look, little kid who is unborn yet, nestled in God's crib, okay, I'm going to leave you there until you've got a shot at being free, and then I'll bring you into the world. That's been my attitude. You just lay there with God, and then eventually, when you can be free, I'll find the woman to bring you into the world through, and you'll be free as best I can make it. That's been my attitude, still my attitude. With the terraformers, good Lord,
let's talk about that. But you might give me another little update here.
Okay.
On these ships, on the Sea Lions Foundation. Where have you gotten on that? Have you were looking for people to help build their own ships?
That's right.
Got the designs.
We have.
You got websites and stuff like that on this?
Yep, we do. You can go to www.sealionsfoundation.com. Spell it out: SEALIONSFOUNDATION. All right. The Sea Lions Foundation is focused on the Christian missionary aspects of our work. For those of you who aren't interested in being Christian missionary, or even if you're not a Christian, that's okay. We're not going to preach at you. Okay, we don't. It's not our problem. Then you go straight to terraformers.neoviking.com and spell it out: TERRAFORMERS.neoviking. NEOVIKI.
Terraformers, FORMER.
Plural.
Okay.
.neoviking.com.
Neo-Viking?
Yep, NEOVIKING.com. The terraformers are going to go out and do things like clean the garbage out of the world's oceans. We know how to do this.
There's a lot of plastic there, don't we?
There is. There's a lot of plastic there. There's about 20 billion pounds of it. And if nothing else, you can burn it for fuel to run your ship. Okay? The Swedes have developed technology where they burn garbage to make electricity, and they've actually burned all their own garbage, and they're importing garbage from the rest of Europe to make electricity. So one of the things we can do is partner with them to set up power plants around the Pacific or even around the Atlantic, because there's garbage everywhere, so that we have a good disposal site that's ecologically sound and economically sound for the garbage we pull out. There are 5 garbage patches in the oceans: North Pacific, South Pacific, North Atlantic, and India. They're all about the size of Texas, about 1,000 miles across. And it's about 600,000 square miles each. And they're killing the wildlife. The oceans are choking to death in human garbage. So we had designed, we took our basic floating home design, the Manta Ray. It's a 125-foot mega yacht that has farm and garden space on board to feed 10 people. It's got 2,800 square feet of living space. It's got a total of 9,100 square feet of deck space indoors. So if you want to expand and make all that living space, you can do that. We're just assuming you'll use some of it for cargo and some of it for farming. It makes all its own electricity. It makes all its own hot and cold fresh water. It disposes all the sewage of everyone on board, puts out clean water. It has onboard vehicle bays. It can back up to a beach and load and retrieve vehicles, or load and recover cargo. Okay, it's got an onboard bay for your shore boat, like the shuttlecraft bay on the Enterprise on Star Trek, where if you anchor in the harbor, you need to use your smaller boat to go to shore, and you can. That's actually kept in a bay in one of the hulls. It's a catamaran configuration. It's in a bay in one of the hulls that has doors that close. So even as you're sailing along in the shoreboat bay, there's 2 feet of water, and your shoreboat is tethered just like it would be at any other time. If you want, you can pump out that water while you're underway. It's no big deal. You have to adjust your trim tanks to allow for it, because it's a few tons of weight. But we've taken that floating home design, and we've added garbage collectors off to the side. Imagine a 100-foot wide conveyor belt made out of something like AstroTurf that is angled down into the water down to about 35 feet. Right, because the plastic is in the top 30 feet. That's where the bulk of it is. And as you're sailing along, and by the way, everything that these ships do, these floating homes do, they do without a drop of fuel. They do it all using the power of the motion of the waves and with wind. There's not a solar panel on one of them. Right? All this is things that we can build ourselves with our own little hands. There's no need to buy high-tech solar panels or anything like that. So you've got your huge conveyor belt on each side. It's 100 feet wide, and it's just bringing up AstroTurf has little fingers on it, so it's going to catch any plastic that's in the water as the belt is turning. But it's also got holes in it, so the water can get through it. You're facing a lot of drag, but you're moving along at about 2 miles an hour. The conveyor belt brings the plastic up to the top out of the water, and when it goes over its top pulley, inside the conveyor belt are sprayers spraying water out through the belt to clean the plastic out of it and make it drop down into the collector bin. Right? From the collector bin, it goes inside to where either you're going to store it before you deliver it to a cargo ship that'll take it to the power plant, or you're going to burn it for fuel right there. Whatever you're going to do with it, all right, that's where it goes inside. The collector bin has a grid on top with 2-inch squares. And it's just basically a heavy cable grid. So any fish bigger than 2 inches that's caught up on the conveyor belt is going to just slide right off. Any sea animal, a dolphin or a sea turtle, will simply ride the conveyor belt up and then slide down off the top of the collector bin, which is slanted. Okay, and just slide down off of that right back into the water without being hurt. All right. Everybody who's cleaning out the ocean, who's talking about cleaning out the ocean, is saying it's impossible because of all the animals that will catch in your nets. Well, don't use nets, dummies. That's why this whole system was invented. It was so that you wouldn't catch anything you didn't want. There's a catwalk extending out over each conveyor belt, or each cook, with a crew member with a hook, and we'll probably have to allow for a crane. Some of this stuff is very heavy, We'll get things like when you encounter a whole fisherman's net that got bound up and he cut it loose. All right, so that's going to be a few hundred pounds. Right? So he would hook that up with the crane and pull it out of the water, and then walk it back down with the crane back to the vessel and drop it into the collection bin. Okay, so we'll be able to get the big stuff too. Now, this is not as big a job as it seems. If we have 400 ships on station in a line doing 2 miles an hour, they will clean out an entire garbage patch. There are 5 garbage patches in just about 2 years. Totally clean.
Now, let me ask you this. The U.S. Navy has just converted a couple of ships to run on the water they float on. They're converting the water to hydrogen at sea.
Yeah, where are they getting the power to do that? To crack hydrogen out of water, you have to either supply an electron to that molecule. Actually, you got to supply 2 electrons to crack the 2 hydrogen atoms off of the single oxygen atom, or you have to supply some kind of force that will force the oxygen to give up 2 electrons to those hydrogen atoms, and then the oxygen ion is bubbled out into the atmosphere, where it's it'll find something to bond with. There's some amount of energy required to make that happen. Where are they getting it? And here we're talking an electric generator of some sort or something.
I'm not sure. They didn't give any technical details on the story.
Okay.
But the gentleman that I'll be interviewing on Tuesday is able to convert hydrogen using these magnetic generators.
Okay.
So,
well, to that I'll say, all the alternative energy research that I know of that's been bearing fruit has been either preempted by the government or been forced to shut down. And in severe cases, like I said, the owner disappeared. So what we're planning to do is use all low-tech, non-threatening stuff where we don't get visits from the men in black because we're working with, vortex generators or whatever, until we have established sufficient numbers and a base where we know that everybody there is one of us. Then we'll begin that research and carry it forward in safety and security. And we won't sell it to the world for money. We'll use it. See, that's one of the problems these guys are having. They're in a system which doesn't want their new energy creation, and they're trying to create it and sell it for money to the system that does not want it, and will kill them for trying to introduce it. In the terraformers, actually, let's say in the Neo-Viking world, which is anybody who lives in one of these vessels and moves about, okay, you have a market that isn't part of this system. We're in the world, but not of it. So if you want to build these things, and there's 20,000 people out there living in our floating homes, you've got a potential market of 20,000 families. Right? But you try to sell it on land, and they're going to find out where your factory is and where and so on, and pretty soon we're going to get a visit from fighter jets. And if you try that, we'll kick your ass out. Because if you're going to be part of that society, go be part of that society. Okay? If you're going to break its rules so that you bring their wrath down on us, we're going to cut you loose. Get out of here. That's just stupid. And in any event, that's a whole different can of worms. Let me stay out of that for a few minutes. Let me finish the introductory matters.
Okay.
When somebody signs up to be a terraformer, they take a monthly membership at $10 a month. We use that money for marketing and recruiting. One of the things, they're also committing to do 22 hours a month of volunteer work. That volunteer work is not out picking up trash off the road, it's fundraising. The money that comes from that fundraising goes into the building fund. We can't touch that for marketing and recruiting. That just steadily grows. for each $50 that they bring in their fundraising, they're credited with 1 hour toward their life yacht. Right? The smallest one, the 45-footer with 800 square feet of, about 800 square feet of living space, it will sell on the open market for about $400,000. And to get that one takes a 10,000-hour commitment, which is 5 years of 40-hour weeks. Okay, they're credited with an hour toward their life yacht for every $50 they bring into their fundraising, and there are many, many, many things that we can do for fundraising. When we've reached the point where we can start the construction fleet, then we'll put out the call to all the members that want to come and help to get started to fill out an application, and in there they list things like their skills and their experience and how many people they're going to be bringing with them. Okay, I mean, there might be, a mommy and a daddy, but they have 8 kids, right? So how many beds do we need to have available? How much food do we need? We need to know that, right? And then from all the members, from the people who've been the most productive in filling up the building fund, we'll take, like the top 100 of those, we'll throw their names in a hat and pull out 20 of them, and those will be the admissions council. They'll look at all the applications. This is not something that we at the board want to have control over. If you're going to make it happen, then you get to make the decision about making it happen too. Right, so those people will be the admissions council. They'll look at all the applications, and they'll form a ranking system, and they'll rank everybody based on skills and so on. And then they'll send invitations to these people to come and join the construction fleet to guide. And they'll do this all along, not just when we're starting, but as we're growing. Okay, when 5 more boats become available, they'll send out an invitation. Okay, on this date we'll have this many birds available. Do you want it? If somebody said, well, right now my job's going well, I'm not ready to just cut loose and go to the construction fleet with my family, then they can turn down their invitation and they can keep doing their monthly volunteer work, right? And then when they are ready, like, maybe they get a layoff notice, okay, then they can change their application, because whether you're employed or unemployed matters on your application, and the admissions council is going to rank the unemployed. They're going to give them some points toward their ranking so that, it outweighs the employed a little bit, right? Because we're talking about jobs here, right? So let's say you get your layoff notice and you change your application, and then so you get an invitation back. So, okay, on this date we'll have this many berths available. If we're building here in the U.S., then it's simply, report to this location. Here's what you need to bring. Here's what you need to put in storage because you're going to need it later. Like our floating homes, when you complete your commitment and we build you a brand new one and we launch you in it, it doesn't have any furniture. It's, the kitchen is set up with the, counters and cupboards and sinks, and the bathroom is set up, and, all the systems are there, but there's no furniture. All right. So if you like the furniture you've got, put it in storage or bring it with you. All right. Because you'll be living on one of our smaller vessels while you're at the construction fleet. We have a contact in the Philippines who is working right now on getting us some land on a riverbank or an island. He's a pastor out in Vallejo, California. He's got a lot of influential contacts out there and a lot of wealthy people. And so we're expecting to hear back very soon that we have a place out there that's been, the use of it has been donated to us for 3 or 4 years. Then it becomes a race to raise enough money to get the initial setup equipment that we need. We have to be able to make electricity out of the river, if it's on a river, or out of the ocean waves, if it's an island. Right? We have to be able to make fresh water out of salt, or even if it's a river, we need to be able to filter that properly before we drink it. All right? The startup crew will go to this place, and we're envisioning maybe 20 people here. Okay, could be bigger. All right, depending on how much money we have to back them with. All right. They get started setting up hydroponic farming and animal pens so that they have something to eat, and the people who are about to to arrive later have something to eat. All right? The first thing any group does when they arrive at the construction fleet is it increase the food capacity for the next group. Okay? We have the startup crew then begin building the floating dry docks that we use to build our floating homes. Floating dry dock is just a big, hollow concrete slab that floats on the water, and you build a floating home on it. We build these out of concrete, believe it or don't. Concrete floats if you shape it right. And it's a better building material for almost every purpose than any other building material. It's just heavy. So it tends to not have the graceful swoop that boat companies want in their sailboats, and it doesn't have the rapid acceleration that companies want in their motorboats. Right? But if you don't care about those two things, it's perfect. So you build your floating home on one of these floating dry docks, and you open the valves in the dry dock and let it sink and float the vessel free. Take it out of the river and anchor it. Close the valves in the floating dry dock and fire up your air compressor and just leave the right valves open and start pumping in compressed air and float it back to the surface and start your next vessel. It takes a 5-year commitment. We count this by hours. Right? It's a 10,000-hour commitment to get the smallest of our life yachts. It's 45 feet long. It's got a walk-in freezer and a 30 cubic foot reach-in fridge. It's got sleeping space for 4, or if you want to put 4 bunk beds in one of the staterooms, you could have 6, 4 kids. But by the time the kids are teenagers, you're going to want to move to the bigger one. It's got a living room, kitchen, bathroom with a full bath in it. It's got a vehicle bay that'll hold a car or a small truck. It's got a shoreboat bay. It can do everything the bigger ones can do, except it has no farm and garden capacity and very limited cargo capacity. It's just a floating home. Right? Then the next biggest one is 65 feet long. These are all catamarans. They're all very stable. Right? They're made out of concrete, and they're shaped. You can see these on freedomfleet.net. There's a walkthrough there, a flash video tour of these. The 65-footer, they're all shaped like turtles. That's where I was. They're all shaped like turtles, so that when you get into heavy wind like a hurricane, the heavier the wind, the more forcefully you're being pressed flat into the water. So it's actually more stable in heavy wind than it is in light wind. They have wave power generators and wind generators. It's a wind turbine. It's not the typical Stewart mill like a big propeller. They're more of a vertical axis turbine, and they make power whenever the wind is.
What was that? I checked out freedomfleet.com. That's
.net.
.net. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, let me pull that one up, and I believe it's the name of the page is Take a Tour. Let's see here.
Floating home tour.
There you go, floating home tour. And yeah, there's a flash presentation there.
Is that lion swim?
Is that what? Live swim?
Is a lion swim?
Oh no! We took our name. Where the terraformers and the Freedom Fleet are secular. They're for anybody. We're not going to preach at you. But the Sea Lions Foundation is a Christian organization, and we took our name as a little pun on one of Jesus' names, the Lion of Judah. It's like the Lion of Judah is going to sea, and we're his brothers and sisters. So we get to claim a little bit of lionhood, being related to the lion. Yeah. There we go.
I would love this, but I've had a lot of people on my boats that got seasick. I don't get seasick, so to me that's the rocking of the ocean and the rocking of the boat is probably one of the The most calming, soothing things I can imagine.
Love that. I love that. Well, first of all, there are reliable cures for seasickness. Secondly, people get over seasickness. If someone joins the merchant marine and he spends his first 2 months seasick, he eventually gets over it and doesn't get seasick anymore. His body learns this is not a problem. Right? And children who are born at sea never get seasick. Matter of fact, they can get land sick, where they step on shore, and if they haven't spent enough time on shore for their inner ear to accustom to it, they start getting queasy, like it's not moving right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So seasickness is an issue, but it's a minor one. And really. Now, when you're a member and you're accumulating hours toward your life yacht, right? You can accumulate, and that is based on how much you bring in your fundraising. Right? You also get the 22 hours a month counted toward your life yacht. The catch is you can only earn a third of what you need through work that occurred somewhere other than coming to the construction fleet and getting started, and then you might leave the construction fleet and go to another assignment, okay? But until you're with us full time, you can only earn a third of what you need to buy your life yacht. When you completed your commitment, 5 years, 7 years for the medium one, or 10 years for the big 125-foot monster, the manta ray, all right? Then you take your time cards down to the sales office and you spend them like money. And we'll keep your time records. That's not something where if you lose the card, you're just screwed. All right. You take your time records down to the sales office, and you order the one you want with all the features that you want.
Now, what about the fresh water? How do you store the fresh water? You can, if you're storing the fresh water beneath. I mean, you first of all, you're probably gathering water if you don't live in Colorado.
Yeah, well, there's a couple ways we make water. All right, vacuum stills will be basically built in, because when you're using wave power to make energy, you've got an arm sticking out of your vessel, and there's a float attached to the end of it. And when a wave lifts the float, it moves the arm and does work. All right, that's a perfect situation to lift a piston and create a vacuum. So you've got a vacuum still that, at sea level, water has to be 212 degrees to boil. Create a vacuum still and pull the pressure down to, a tenth of a bar. Now it's only got to be about 90 degrees to boil. That's easy to distill water like that. It takes very little electricity. So you're making water there. They also have all these things, they're turtle-shaped, and they have ridges around them so that when you get rained on, the rain is captured and run into your freshwater tanks.
Okay.
Okay? Now, from there, it has to be filtered, because the top of your boat, it could have bird guano or whatever on it, right? But still, you're capturing the fresh water. The manta ray, the largest one, if you get an inch of rain, like the weatherman said, we're expecting an inch of rain tonight, right? If you get an inch of rain on that vessel, it will put 1,500 gallons of fresh water in its tanks. And at sea, it rains every stinking day. All right. Rains a little less if you're going to be spending your time on a river, where a lot of people will go. A lot of people will they'll take part in this, and they'll take their floating home, and they'll go back to a town that they know that's on a river, maybe the town they came from. They'll park their vessel in the river, and they'll go get a job. That's fine. Now they don't have a lodging payment anymore. And if they bought the power package that allows them to make all the power they need from a sluggish little river like the Ohio, fine, they've got all the electricity they need. Right? There's when you complete your engagement and you buy your vessel, you're getting a brand new one. All right, we're not, let's say as a terraformer, you spend a year in fundraising, and then you come full time to the construction fleet. Let's say you spend 2 years there, and then you finish out your commitment on a collector ship. You're part of this 400 ship fleet that is scooping garbage out of the ocean. So you're out there for a couple of years, we give you vacations, take the time off you want, okay? I mean, we'll have plenty of ships. It's not like you couldn't go to Fiji for your vacation, okay, for free. And then when all that's done, we're not going to make you take the collector ship you were using. It's a garbage ship, okay? You don't want to live on that, right? We're going to give you a brand new one. So you go, you place your order with the options and amenities that you want. Those are all priced in hours, right? The basic unit is this many hours. So if you want this particular super duper power package, then that's this many hours. And if you want this, if you want us to finish out the interior with, you want a carpeted floor and sheetrock and drapes, we'll be able to do all that. It'll just cost more hours. So you go work more hours on the collection fleet or whatever your assignment is. We have we're forming a diplomatic corps. Their job is to go to all the places around the ocean we're about to work on where they're dumping their garbage in the ocean and either persuade them to stop or work out a deal where their garbage scows meet our collection ships and just transfer their cargo. So they just dump it and we scoop it up immediately. Right? Because the first problem is to stop it from getting worse. Nobody who's cleaning up the ocean, and there are organizations working on it, nobody is stopping it from getting worse.
Now, talk to me a little bit about these wing sails. These are interesting.
The wing sail was invented back in the 50s. Somebody realized, well, if it'll lift an airplane, it'll drive a boat. And so they took an ordinary mast and they just put wooden battens around it to make a wing shape, and then they put cloth over the battens, and it's something you can raise and lower it with a pulley. Okay, but when you raise your sail, the wood battens inside it hold it in a wing shape rather than the traditional sail shape. And the great thing about a wing is, one, you don't have all those ropes to control it. Two, it creates thrust more efficiently than a traditional sail, actually twice as much thrust per square foot. Three, you don't have to learn all the knots and ropes and everything else, because all you do with a wing sail is rotate it until it catches the wind at the angle you like. That's it. That's all there is to know. And on ours, the wing sail at the bottom of the mast, we'll put a control gear, a control mechanism, so that from the cockpit you can rotate that wing sail however you want. And then in an emergency, let's say your control system breaks down for whatever reason, you can actually just walk indoors. You walk over to there's like a closet door, and you open that, and you're looking at the base of that mast where there's a crank. You can put an emergency handle in and crank that sail to where you want it to be, right, without going outdoors in a storm. And you can raise and lower it from right there too, right? But all a wing sail has to do is rotate to the angle of attack you want the wind to be at, and it does its job twice as well as a regular sail without having to go to seamanship school to learn all the ropes, because you don't need them anymore.
Have you heard of something called graphene?
Yes. Yes, it's a construction material used to make ultralight masts, right?
Yes, it's made out of graphite, and it's stronger than steel, and it is bendable. I mean, you can make cell phones out of it. You can do a lot of different things with it.
Well, until we have our own graphene production facilities, and we'll get there, all right, we're making these out of the simplest materials available so that the average owner, if he runs into trouble, can simply find a peaceful shore to pull in, and he can make repairs from local available materials with tools on board. I mean, even wooden masts. Okay, so that he can go ashore, cut down a tree, trim it down, turn it into a mast, hoist it into place, put his, he can make the battens out of wood. He can use his animals on board to make wool for the sail, or if he's got, Angora rabbits, silk, or whatever they may have. No, it's Angora. Sorry, it's not silk. He's able to make repairs. One reason the ships are built out of concrete, even though the naval architect wants to use plastic, is because if I get a hole in a concrete vessel, I can pull into shore on almost any island, I can locate the materials necessary to make concrete, and then I can patch that hole, and it'll cure underwater. And our hulls, if you've seen the part of the presentation where you see cars parked in the lower hull,
Yes.
Right, they're on a floor, and underneath that floor is nothing but a honeycomb-shaped grid, so that we have, I think it's 20-odd flotation compartments. So it's something, and it's sealed. All right, so that hull is like a giant pontoon. There's not cargo sitting down in there on the bottom of the ship or anything like that. All that's in there is we use some of those separate isolated flotation compartments as trim tanks. And so if something penetrates the hull, like if you hit a floating cargo container, these are very dangerous, and they always float one corner up, ready to rip up a boat. We saw this recently in a Robert Redford movie. If you hit one of those, all it's going to do is fill the flotation compartment that got punctured. You aren't going to sink.